Senate Democrats' uphill battle to keep the seat held by Max Baucus for more than 3 decades just got a little tougher. Of plagiarism charges against the senator appointed to hold the seat, who's now running to keep it. In Democratic hands, John Walsh, the only Iraq War veteran in the U.S. Senate, is trying to explain revelations by Jonathan Martin in the New York Times that major excerpts of his master's thesis were lifted almost word for word from a think tank document. So was it plagiarism or PTSD? Senator Walsh told the Associated Press, "I don't want to blame my mistake on PTSD, but I do want to say it may have been a factor. My head was not in a place very conducive to a classroom and an academic environment." Joining me now for our Daily Fix, Chris Salissa, MSNBC contributor and managing editor of PostPolitics.com, Molly Ball, political writer at The Atlantic, and Jonathan Capehart, MSNBC contributor and Washington Post editorial writer. Chris Salissa, first to you. I mean, we had a lot about Rand Paul that Rachel Maddow had uncovered, but Senator Walsh's explanation that it could have been his war experience, not to discount his war experience, but lifting a master's thesis for the War College?
Well, and you know, Andrea, the reality is that, look, if he was suffering from PTSD, and no one is disputing that, that is one thing. Deciding to plagiarize at least a quarter of your master's thesis at the War College is another. I think some people would say, look, if it was you were struggling that much, you go to your professors and you say, I'm having a very difficult time, I need a break, and I'll come back. The problem is, at the end of the day, no matter what the context was, he passed off work that wasn't his as his own. In another place, I don't think this is a campaign killer, Andrea, but this, as you mentioned in the open, this was already a very hard seat to hold. He needed to run a close to perfect campaign, and this obviously is not in that blueprint.
It does raise questions about the Democrats' vetting process already, because this was an appointed seat. He seat because Max Baucus became ambassador to China, Molly. Rand Paul gets a pass. Rand Paul was lifting whole sections of speeches, and no one seems to care beyond those of us in the media.
I don't think Rand Paul does get a pass, but I do think that it is more of an arguable situation when you're talking about a speech where you're taking ideas from places, and maybe if you had written that down, there'd be a footnote. And that was basically Rand Paul's argument, although he has now been trying to cite more aggressively. But that's a speech. That's not something that you are submitting under your name for your master's thesis. You know, the case of Joe Biden, that basically killed his campaign in 1988. That was something where in some speeches he had been citing the guy, and then in others he hadn't, and he got caught when he hadn't been. This is not a marginal case at all. There's nothing blurry about the lines here. I mean, it's open and shut. And if you look at the interactive graphic on the Times website, you can see whole sections that are just word for word taken from somewhere else. You can hear in his response that he's not denying it, he's not disputing it, and I think you can even hear in that a sort of acknowledgement like, look, I don't have much of an explanation for this.
And we put up that graphic with the yellow sections showing that they're just whole sections. Jonathan Capehart, when we talk about a master's thesis, this is, you know, it's just a complete violation of all academic principles.
Academic principles, ethics, and at the War College, integrity. From everything that I've read at the War College, it is drummed into your head from the moment you get there that, you know, plagiarism is wrong, it's bad, you don't do it, and it violates the integrity, the code that's there at the War College. I mean, the senator not only has a problem with his fellow members of the Senate and with the American people in terms of, you know, this guy's ethics, but now he has people in the military who followed the rules, who take this honor code very seriously, and he didn't accidentally violate it. He blatantly violated it. And so, you know, I agree with Chris, you know, to blame it on PTSD, if he has PTSD, that's one thing. But to use that as an excuse for something this blatant, I think, is I'm getting in trouble for saying this, but dishonorable.
And he may face some consequences because of the military code and because of the academic institution in particular with keeping that master's. Jonathan Capehart, Molly Ball, great to see you, and Chris Salissa, thank you all.